All right, let me get this started. Well, thank you for inviting me, Dr. Parker. I'm super excited to be here and to see some of my former colleagues while I was an undergrad at UHD. I wanted to just talk about how undergraduate research at UHD shaped my career during my undergraduate studies. I am now the Assistant Dean of the College of Sciences and Technology, so I'm going to take you through my path of how I ended up as Assistant Dean, and I'm going to highlight the areas in which being a female in science had some kind of impact on my decisions, on where I ended up. And so I want to start by just talking about some of the characteristics that defined me prior to coming into UHD that could have, prevented me from completing my degree. Okay, so they could have been detrimental to me. One of them was first generation. I was a first generation college student. Another one was the fact that I was a female, right? This series is about women in science. And I was a minority as well. So at that time, I didn't think about these things as anything negative or anything working against me. Now that I reflect on it, I can appreciate that it could have stopped me. It could have been a reason why I didn't finish my studies. But I didn't let that stop me. First generation, I'm the first one to graduate from high school in my family. My parents didn't finish middle school. And so they were always encouraging to pursue an education. But it did present its challenges, the fact that I didn't have anyone's path to follow, right? So I didn't know the process of applying to a university. I didn't know what I had to do to prepare to get to that stage. Female, right? In our culture, females are expected to get married, have kids, take care of the family. There's not a whole lot of emphasis on education for females, Hispanic females. But I'm glad that my dad broke that mold and allowed me to go to school. He encouraged it. And so that really helped out. How do I overcome these three characteristics that could have been detrimental to me? Through inquiry. Right, I was thinking as a scientist even back then, right? Asking questions. Like I said, I didn't know the first steps of applying to college. I was in high school and I just knew that I wanted to go to a university, but I didn't know how to get there. And so I started asking questions and applying to the university. And I really didn't think I had any other choice but UHD. So UHD ended up being my first choice. I didn't know that there was potential to go study outside of Houston. Right, and in our culture is not very common either, right, to leave home and to go study elsewhere, okay. Being a minority could also have impacted me because, like I said, I didn't have in my family, I didn't have anyone that had been through college, and so I didn't have anybody to look up to. But like I said, that didn't stop me. It did slow me down, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. My high school background could also have been working against me. So I didn't have a strong high school background. I went to a high school in which I would sit in class and absorb all the information and regurgitate it on an exam. I didn't have to pick up a book when I went home. And so there was a lot of lack of preparation. I wasn't college ready when I got to the university. So there was a stage of adaptation to this university life. This did impact me. It did slow me down because my first freshman year, I did not do well academically just because I just wasn't used to that type of environment. So it did take some time to adapt. At that time, there wasn't all these orientations that are in place, all the Success Center, all of that wasn't there when I was going to school at UHD. This is something newer, right, that didn't exist back then. And so I had to adapt on my own, right, trying to really learn the studying skills that were going to work for me, really understanding that I needed to manage my time, understanding that I had to pick up the book, I had to study at home. It wasn't going to come easily to me. I had to work for it. And so there was a period of adaptation, and like I said, it slowed me down. I didn't finish my degree in 4 years because I did struggle those first couple semesters. And, I want to go over these characteristics because some of you might be able to identify with them, and just to kind of give you some information on how I was able to overcome them. Now, My next one is a financial situation that some of you might be familiar with, right? So I didn't come from a wealthy family. I came from very humble beginnings. And so we didn't have all this money to throw at education. Yes, my parents wanted me to get an education, but there wasn't a whole lot of money there for it. So they were able to help me out my first 2 semesters of school. They were able to pay my tuition, but after that, they could not provide any financial help. So I had to investigate, right? I had to see what resources are out there, what money is out there that I could use to pay for my tuition. I didn't qualify for financial aid. I didn't qualify for scholarships at this point because I had screwed up my first year. And so I had to get a job, right? And I had to work and pay for my own tuition. And so that really, though, helped me in terms of independence, becoming very independent and not having to depend on my parents. It did help me out in that way. But once I was able to raise my GPA, then I was able to take advantage of all the scholarships that are available. So these characteristics, although they could have hindered my education and stopped me, they didn't. I was able to overcome them. And it's because, you know, we have these aspirations. We come into college with these aspirations. My aspiration was I want to be a medical doctor, right? I didn't think that it was beyond my reach. I thought this is something that I could do. Obviously, I didn't end up taking that route, but not because I couldn't, because I chose not to. So it's great to have these aspirations, but don't get married to them, right? Just keep in mind that these interests could change. They could change at the beginning of your college career, sitting in a classroom, and you really enjoy the subject, and now you're on a different track. And so, and it's okay. It's okay to change, right? Could change after you graduate from college. You know, you realize you don't want to go on that track. And so it's all right to have that change. I think it's important to find a career in which you have the passion for it, because without passion, it'll get very mundane and very boring. And so you have to choose wisely, right? Don't just go for the career that, you know, you're going to make a lot of money. You really have to have the passion for it. And so again, I hope all of you guys have these aspirations, and that these aspirations are the ones guiding you. So I finish up high school. I'm ready to apply to university. I only applied to one, to UHD. Like I said, that was my first choice, my only choice. I didn't want to go to the big UH institution, but I didn't know the process. My high school counselor did not help me out in terms of applying or finding scholarships, nothing like that. And so when I did go on and apply by myself and I got the acceptance letter, I was super excited because I was accepted to UHD. Little did I know then that it was open enrollment, and so everybody got accepted, right? But for me, it was this accomplishment. I'm in college. I'm the first one. I did it. You know, now I have to prove myself. I have to complete it, right? So when I started at UHD, I felt right at home. And so what I mean by this is that there was a lot of students with similar backgrounds as me, first-gen students that had similar interests. I saw enough females pursuing the sciences. Okay, we have 2 alum here that were science majors, 2 female alum. And so I saw enough of students, you know, that were in a higher academic level than me, and then lower freshmen that were pursuing the sciences, biology, chemistry, whatnot. So I didn't think it was out of the norm. I thought, oh, you know, this is, I'm not going to have a problem pursuing a degree in the natural sciences. So it wasn't until later that I found myself being one of the only ones, right? At this time, it was not an issue here. I discovered the Scholars Academy in the middle of my time at UHD. Once I had raised my grades up and met that cum GPA that the SA was asking for, I then applied to the SA, and that was the best choice I could have made at UHD. So what that allowed me to do is, because at that time there was enough funding and the group wasn't as large, we were able to get scholarships for all of our tuition, for fall semester, for spring semester. And so that took a huge burden off of me, right? I didn't have to work as much because I knew that my tuition was going to be able to get paid for. And I became more involved at UHD. So I became involved in undergraduate research. I became involved in student organizations. and I spent more time at UHT. And we all know the statistics show that the more time you spend at an institution, the better you do academically. I'm one of those statistics because I tended to do very well, right? I made the dean's list a couple of times. Once I was in SA and I was super involved and I had the time to dedicate to the other things. And not just academics, but also, you know, going to events and being part of student organizations. And so without SA, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that. I would have had to have worked throughout the whole time that I was there and not having that time. And so during my time there, I was sitting in one of my classes and the faculty was Dr. Galati, and I really enjoyed her teaching style. And so I approached her. I asked her if I could be part of her undergraduate research project. At that time, she was working on a Mars stimulant soil that was provided by the NASA Johnson Space Center, and we were trying to isolate and identify microorganisms that could survive in this soil. And this could give us a glimpse at what kind of microorganisms would be able to be found on Mars, right, if there existed life there. And so I worked with other colleagues that were interested in the sciences, that were pursuing biology degrees, chemistry degrees on this project. And so I learned a lot about collaboration, you know, individual projects, but also collaborating as a whole on one main goal. I was also able to develop and further develop my critical thinking skills that I had been acquiring. You develop problem-solving skills and analytical skills. This experience really shaped where I ended up, and the connection that I established with Dr. Galati also shaped it, right? She became my faculty mentor, and we were in contact throughout my PhD and even after my PhD. So she was really a really important figure for me, and also coming back to UHD when I came back to teach. And so at this time, I'm at the end of my undergrad career, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do, right? I have three options. I could go to graduate school, I could go to medical school, or I could look for a job. So medical school and graduate school were kind of out of the question because I didn't prepare for it. My senior year, I should have been working on the GRE. I should have been working on the MCAT if that's what I wanted to do. But I didn't really have a whole lot of guidance in that aspect, and so I didn't end up taking these. So I thought about it, and I said, I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to prepare and figure out really what I want to do, because at this point I was still considering medical school. But I had just came off of an undergraduate research project that I really, really enjoyed. I enjoyed presenting the research. I enjoyed engaging with the faculty over the project. And so my passion for research was beginning, it started there with the undergrad research project. And so I decided that I was going to work as a research technician. And so I commented this to Dr. Galati, and I said, hey, I'm going to take some time off. I think I'm going to work as a technician first and then figure out what I'm going to do. But it might be grad school because I really liked the research. So then she knew someone in the medical center. She was friends with somebody in the medical center that knew another PI at Baylor College of Medicine that was looking for a technician. And so she got me in contact with him. I interviewed, I applied, he interviewed me, and then he hired me. So he hired me even before I finished my undergrad. So I started working in April. I finished up my bachelor's in May. And so that connection also got me to this next stage as a research technician. And so I was excited. I had a job right out of undergrad. I knew that wasn't going to be it. I wanted to reach the highest level of education that I could. That was my goal. But I wasn't sure what it was going to be. Was it going to be medical school or graduate school? And keep in mind that when I'm making these decisions, I am thinking also as a female that wanted to have a family, right? I was engaged at this time. I was going to get married right after I graduated, and then I wanted to start my family. So that also went into consideration in what career I was going to end up choosing. And so I ended up as a research technician in the lab of Gady Schalsky. So he was a geneticist, a molecular geneticist that worked on Dictyostelium discoideum. So a unique social amoeba that when needed can aggregate and form a fruiting body. And so we were studying these mutants. We were inducing mutations in the social amoeba. and looking at their behavior, right? We wanted to know if they had the ability to cheat. So we were trying to identify genes that were involved in the cheating behavior. And so, but this was unique because as a research technician, you are not usually given a project of your own. You are usually taking care of the mundane of the lab, making sure that there's glassware there, making sure that everything's stocked up. So those kinds of duties are usually what research technicians are in charge of. So I was in a unique position because he gave me part of this project, and it's because he believed in me, right? I proved myself, and he saw potential in me, and so he gave me a piece of this project so that I could work with the graduate student that was leading the project. And so through my work, I contributed enough to the paper that I got, I was on the publication as a co-author. And so that was really exciting to me, right? I didn't understand or appreciate the extent of what the significance of this publication, what kinds of doors it would open up until later, right? Until I start getting the calls. And so the fact that my name is on a publication, that's already, right, a huge accomplishment as a research technician. But the fact that it was a paper in Nature, right, one of the top journals in research, that just threw it out of the water, right? So it was a super accomplishment for me as a research technician. I started getting recruited from Baylor College of Medicine Developmental Biology program because of this publication. They reached out to me. They wanted me to join their program. And so, and I also, at this time, I realized that my passion was in research. I really liked the inquiry, the designing of the experiments, the thinking about those results and how they fit into the big picture. And so it was at this point that I decided that it was probably going to be a graduate school. Now, I had the choice of continuing working in the lab and going on to the next project, right, in his lab. He was happy to keep me on. But I decided that graduate school, it was time for graduate school. I had been taking the GRE. I decided medical school was out of the question. Medical school would be a lot of hours away from my family. And so although I really had the passion for graduate school, the fact that the investment in an MD program also pushed me towards the PhD. So I decided to apply to all the schools that were around the Texas Medical Center, UT Health Science, UTMB, Rice University, and then of course Baylor College of Medicine. And I got accepted to all of them. I got an interview to Rice. I didn't make it because I took the Baylor acceptance. And so I really liked Baylor. I really liked the collaboration at that institution. It was a very, very collaborative environment. There wasn't a whole lot of competition going on. And so I really liked that environment, so I chose them. And this is when a woman pursuing a degree in science became evident to me, that it was not as common as I thought it was. But you have to consider now I'm on a different level. It is no longer a bachelor's of science that I'm pursuing. I am now on the PhD route. And so when I joined, I began to see, and this is true as I'm progressing, now that I'm here as assistant dean, I can say this, that the further I got in my academic career, the female presence became diluted. Okay, so I saw less and less females that looked like me as well as I went further and further in my career. So I'm sitting there, the first class of grad school, right, with my cohort. This would be the cohort that I'd be graduating with. And so I look around and I notice I'm no longer at a UHT type of institution. The makeup is very different. There is diversity, but I am the only Hispanic female in that class. And so that's when it really became evident that this is not something that is commonly pursued by people that look like me. And so at that time is when you start thinking that you really, really have to prove yourself. And you kind of doubt it, right? Is it because we're not successful in this degree? Why is it that there aren't any more of us here? There were some international students that were from Mexico, but we didn't have any that were raised and born in the States like I was. So I was the only one there that had the similar type of background. And so So all of this plays into how hard I studied for those courses, trying to prove myself, right? And this is where I think being a female in the sciences is a little bit more challenging than being a male in the sciences, because I feel that as females, we have way more to prove, right? And on top of that, here at this point, I'm a graduate student. I have a family. I have a husband. I have a child. So I have some commitments at home. So I have to be very good at multitasking. And so I went through my first year of courses. I did fine in my courses, took my oral exams, did fine. When I rotated in my labs to find the project that I wanted to work on, I was very strategic in the lab that I chose. I had to be, because I was a female in the sciences that had a family, I had to choose a lab that would be able to see that, right? That there was going to be situations where I have to take my daughter to the doctor's office and be understanding in that way. I would still execute my job, but just to be accommodating in that way. And the lab of Jeff Rosen is the one that really gave me that. So he was a great mentor. And, it goes to show that he is very accommodating. That's why it was predominantly females in that lab that had families. And so that played a lot, right? The fact that I needed to be in the lab, I was going to be in that lab for 5 years. And so I needed to make sure that I was choosing correctly. I didn't want to end up in a lab that I wasn't comfortable with, and then halfway through I had to switch out of the lab. And so it ended up being a great experience. He was great. I had to work a lot harder than maybe other students that didn't have families, because I had to get everything done in those 9-10 hours that I was there, so that I could get home to my kids. And so I had to be very good at multitasking and very efficient while I was there. And so, and because of that, I was able to finish in a timely fashion. So our project focused on studying an enzyme called PLK2. It's a kinase that is involved in cell cycle regulation. And so this kinase, we had a knockout mouse that had it knocked out. And so what we studied is the development of the mammary gland. And we found that there was a lot of hyperproliferation, so a lot of growth within these cells, to the point that it led to hyperplasias. So hyperplasias are the beginning stages of cancer. And so we were particularly interested in this kinase because it seemed to be silenced in patients with triple-negative breast cancer, which is the most aggressive type of breast cancer. So the goal was to find something downstream of PLK2 that could be a target, a drug target that we could use in treatment of this type of cancer. And so great experience there. During my graduate studies, I was very fortunate that Jeff allowed me to teach at University of St. Thomas towards the end of my PhD. And so I wanted to get a feel for teaching. I had always been involved in community engagement through Baylor's programs. And I had worked with school district teachers, getting them ready to teach science to the students. But I wanted to take it to the next level and work in higher ed, work with college students. And so I asked him, he was okay with me teaching, so I started teaching human anatomy and physiology at University of St. Thomas. And I really started enjoying the teaching aspect, right? So when I was done with my PhD, I finished up and became a postdoc in his lab for a short time because there were still projects that I could work on. But then it was time for me to take the next step, right? Am I going to seek a postdoc elsewhere? Ideally, you want to go outside of the institution you did a PhD in. And so do I want to go and do a postdoc elsewhere, or do I want to teach full-time? I knew I didn't want to do both. I wanted to do 100% teaching or 100% research. And so want to say that opportunities can present themselves when you least expect it, so be ready for them. An example of that is what happened to me. And as you can see here, this is the Salk Institute in La Jolla, California, and there's a reason why I put this institute there. And so when I was at the end of my graduate studies, I applied to present at the American Association of Cancer Research, the breast cancer branch, that was having a conference in San Francisco. And so I applied it as a graduate student, hoping to get a poster presentation out of it. I ended up getting invited to do an oral presentation. And so this was a big deal because I was just a graduate student. And so I prepared and I prepared, and just like you guys should always prepare for any presentation, any project, you should always be ready, because you never know who's watching. You never know what kind of opportunity can present themselves to you. And so I presented, I did my work, and after my presentation, Jeff Rosen pulls me aside and says, I have someone that wants to meet you. And so it was a PI that was working at the Salk Institute, was working on breast cancer, and he invited me to do a postdoc there. So he basically offered me a job as a result of this presentation, because he was impressed with the presentation. He was a developmental biologist, so he was always looking for developmental biologists, and he knew that if I was coming from Jeff Rosen's lab, we were good material. And so he offered me a job on the spot, and so I didn't take it because I had to think about it. It was something I had to think about. It wasn't just a, I'm going to go for it. It was more of a family decision. I have to consult it because I have a husband, I have kids. This would mean moving the entire family. It's just not me. And so, and I also knew that I really, really enjoyed teaching. And so at that time, I'm communicating with Dr. Galati, and I'm telling her, hey, I've been teaching, I really enjoy it, I've graduated, is there any positions open at UHD? And there happened to be a position open for anatomy and physiology of all the subjects. And so I had the experience from St. Thomas in the subject. And so after thinking about it, weighing the pros and cons, my passion for teaching was more than my passion for research. So I ended up taking a faculty position at UHD, and this is some of the pictures that I have with my students studying the bones, studying the brain. It's an A&P class over the summer. So I enjoyed it until my second year, and the teaching part, I will always have the passion for it. I will always enjoy it. But what really hit me that second year was the gender wage gap. It presented itself at that time. And what I mean by the gender wage gap is I began to see the inequity in salaries between female faculty and male faculty. Okay, so I came in at a not so high salary. It was the minimum that they could offer. I was right out of grad school. Right, I didn't think I could negotiate that much because I didn't have as much experience. And so I took a pay cut, right, from a postdoc salary that I was being offered in Jeff Rosen's lab to teaching. But it was okay with me because I was going to be doing I was going to do it because I had the...
Here?
Irvin, can you mute yourself, please? I was going to be doing something that I had passion for, right? And so I was okay with it. I was okay with taking that pay cut. But then 2 years later, I hear that there's these males that were hired at the same level as I was with the salary that was 20% more, right? So that really is when I started being uncomfortable with this. I wasn't happy anymore. The students were the only ones that made me happy, really. But I was, at that point, I started looking for my next step, right? Okay, I've done the teaching. I could do it on the side, right? But I need to go into that next step in my career, okay? And so at that time, there was an opportunity, right? There was a vacancy as assistant dean in the College of Sciences and Technology. And the dean came, and we had already had this conversation. He already knew about my interest and where I wanted to go. And so he thought about me when this vacancy became open, and he offered me the interim position. And so I proved myself as an interim, and then I applied when the actual position came up, and I got it. And there was a lot of lessons learned. You know, this time around, this is an administrative position, right? And at this point, I had learned my lesson from coming in as a faculty in terms of, knowing my self-worth. I know that, this salary, this is what I deserve. I've proven to you that I can do a really good job in this position. And so this is important, right? Knowing your self-worth so that you can then negotiate these salaries when you're up for that job that you're looking for. Knowing that I'm just as capable as a male counterpart, you know, and I can be just as successful in science as males. And also that despite the background that I have, and anybody's background, that doesn't define your future, right? So you make your own future. I was able to reach my goals that I had in mind. I'm not done, right? But knowing really your self-worth, right? I learned my lesson. And I wanted to share that aspect with you, the salary discrepancy, because it will probably come up as a woman in science in that next job. So if you can prepare for it, right, you're probably going to be in a better situation than I was. It hit me later, once I had already accepted the job. But for you young women that are interested in science, it could definitely be something that you can prepare for. And I kind of went through that presentation fairly fast. So it's pretty much all I have. I thank Dr. Parker for inviting me. Just a glimpse of my journey. It really helped me put together this presentation because I really reflected on these things that I was carrying, right, as a freshman, that I didn't know that could actually had an impact, and I was able to overcome them. So it was a nice reflection into my journey of how I ended up where I am today. And so with that, I'd like to take some questions that you guys might have. I'd rather talk to you guys than continue talking about my journey. Any questions that you guys have?
Great job. Do you want to unshare your screen?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the link to unshare it.
Up top, I think.
Oh, there it is.
Wonderful.
I have a question, Dr. Villegas.
Yes.
Okay, good. And identify yourself if you don't mind.
Oh, hi, I'm Emily. So I wanted to know, because I really want to go to grad school too, but I guess it's kind of worrisome to me because I'm like you. I want to start a family and everything, but I just want to know how long ultimately it took you to get through like all of your education, like upper level education.
Past my bachelor's or including my bachelor's?
Including the bachelor's.
Okay, so it took me about 5.5 years for my bachelor's. Okay, but that's because I didn't do so well at the beginning, so I had to stay here a little bit longer. And then I took a break as a technician, right, for about 3 years to get ready for grad school. And then grad school itself took about 5.5.
Okay. Yeah, because I have a question. I visited and they said 5 to 7 years it takes for.
Yeah, it really depends on the project that you're working on. I was fortunate to have a mouse model of the enzyme that I wanted to study, and so that accelerated my project. Otherwise, it would have taken longer trying to create a mouse model.
Great. Someone else?
I have a question too.
Mm-hmm.
Is it better? Thank you for.
Uh-oh.
We can't hear you, Joanna.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm graduating in 3 semesters, and I don't know still if I have to do a master's or PhD. Which one should I choose? Like, I think master's is good, but PhD, I don't know, it's too long for a female.
A PhD? Well, are you going to ultimately want a PhD, or you're not sure if you just want to end at a master's?
I'm not sure. That's why I would like to have a suggestion. What is better whenever you, I like research, but I don't think research is the only thing that I want to do.
So
will
it really
masters help me?
It depends on where you see yourself in 5-10 years, right? What is your long time goal? Do you want to teach? Where do you see yourself? And that'll determine which degree is more appropriate for you.
But is master's helpful if you want to work for companies?
The PhD is always, you know, they want PhDs. If you want to work for a pharmaceutical company, they're looking for those PhDs, right? So it really depends where you want to end up working.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Taylor. I also had a question. So I wanted to know if
during your whole educational journey, if there was anything that you would have done differently.
Yeah, I mean, I would have studied harder that first semester, first year at UHC and taken it a little bit more seriously, which I did, and I was out having fun also, right? And so that played into me not being successful as well that first year. So, but you know, you learn your lessons. I didn't know better. And so that's probably what I would change. You know, out of my PhD, I wouldn't change. I probably would have started it a little bit earlier, but then I wouldn't have had that Nature publication. And so that worked out fine.
Okay, thank you.
I think Ruth Sepulveda had a question. Ruth, can you speak it? She put it in the chat. Can you read it?
Okay, let me go back.
Oh, here she is.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I should be able to speak it. I wanted to know when you started studying for the GRE, or when or how the best way to do it would be.
I started studying about a year before I took it, but it wasn't intense studying. I didn't start really intensely into the books until maybe a month and a half before I took the GRE.
Okay, thank you. And for that, was it just reading like the books, like the preparation books, or were there classes available?
I took a class, but it really didn't. I think it was a Princeton review class. It really didn't help. It was the books.
Okay, thank you so much.
I also have a question.
Yes.
So I know you weren't able to attend medical school because of your family and stuff, but I was wondering if you could give an advice, is it good to like take a master's or do a master's before going to medical school? And if you would have gone to medical school, how early do you think you would have wanted to study, like started studying?
So a master's in what, right? You don't need a master's to go to medical school, right? Bachelor's is enough. It really depends on what kind of master's you're trying to do. If you think that's going to get you an edge, might not, right? It just depends. It really depends on the pool of applicants, right? And how you look like with that pool of applicants when you apply to medical school. For me, it wasn't just the fact that I had a family that I didn't end up going to medical school. It's because I really had more passion for the research than I did for the MD career. And so in terms of years, the MD would have taken me a lot longer, because my aspirations were cardiovascular surgeon, and so that would have been a really long time.
Same. And I was just wondering that how early would you advise for someone to start studying? So I'm a junior now. So how early do you think I should start studying now, or I should wait till like my senior year or something like that?
For the MCAT?
Yes, ma'am.
I would go ahead and start studying, but just keep in mind that you have to have enough upper level courses, bio courses under your belt. That will really help you with the MCAT, like the cell biology, the biochemistry. You need to have those courses, have taken those courses, and then you can start studying for the MCAT. But don't wait till your senior year, though.
All right. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Min. I have a question. Can you share? Well, I heard that when you did your PhD and you choose your project, then you finish it in 7 years. But I heard a lot of stories like people giving up because like they couldn't finish their project. So, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I finished mine in 5.5, and so it wasn't as long as other students were there. Some students were there for 7, 8 years. I did see some students get very discouraged throughout their time, and you know, you can prolong a project if just stuff doesn't work. You get negative results constantly, right? So if you see that a project is not going in the direction that you think it should be, right, you have to change right away. You can't go in, you know, put 4 years trying and trying and trying, and then you know, you're 4 years out and you have nothing. You have nothing. You have to have enough to publish. That's the goal, right? In graduate school, you can't graduate until you have published your work. And so you have to have enough data to publish. So it's really knowing that if a project is not going in the right direction, changing the direction of that project. And this is something that you would discuss with your mentor. I did see some students, I remember one student that came into the lab while I was a technician. I mean, 4.0 student, did awesome in all the grad school courses. But when she came down to do the work, the bench work, she was no good. She could not run a gel. She could not do anything. She realized that that was not for her. She really liked the academic aspect, taking the classes, but in terms of doing that research, so she had put in 2 years, and so she ended up leaving with the master's because she had enough to leave with the master's. But yeah, it's just not getting discouraged, you know, and really having those discussions with your mentor. You have a mentor and you have a committee, right? So the committee is also responsible for guiding you in the right direction. And if they see that something is not working, they should also be having those conversations with you as well. So you'll have committee meetings sometimes twice a semester with them to discuss the progress of your project.
Thank you, Dr. Villegas. That's really helpful.
Great. Let me ask Houston. He has a comment about the MS or PhD or both question. Go ahead, Houston.
I think Emily, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think it was praise. I think it was praise.
Okay, can you hear? You can hear me then.
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, sir.
So one of the things that I thought about an MS versus PhD is if you go for a PhD and you have just the situation that Elizabeth just talked about, you can kind of escape with either a research or a coursework master's and then go on to pursue something else, whether it be a PhD in another science or whatever. If you take a master's, it doesn't give you that option. Also, by discipline, sometimes the degree is different. So I don't know what it is like in biology, but in chemistry, for chemistry degrees in the US, if you see that somebody had a master's, more than likely they didn't really want to start in that way. They either got into a school that they didn't want to get their PhD from, or they courseworked out at one school and then got into the PhD program in another school or whatever. It's not like that in all sciences. So like materials science, you have to write a master's thesis. So it's very different in every science. As the when do you start studying for the GRE, my comment is you start studying as a freshman. I think a lot of folks end up forgetting all the stuff they learn in freshman chemistry and organic chemistry. You have to review that stuff because the GRE is such that you have to answer those things very quickly. And you can't, it's not a eliminate the best answer or the worst answer sort of test. It is you have to know it quickly and move on.
Okay, thank you, Houston. Do we have any other comments or questions to Dr. Villegas?
I have a question.
Okay, Anika.
Hi, Dr. Villegas.
Hi, Anika.
First of all, to start off, you have an amazing story, and every day it's inspiring hearing how you broke down these barriers and you are in the place that you are today. It just inspires other women like me, and I know there's always going to be this difference between how men are treated in the scientific community and women, and it's still getting better, but there's still a lot of work to be done, obviously. So my question is, I know you said that you were truly inspired by the research aspect of just science, unlike the medical or dental or whatever else field. So for people like me who have done research and they didn't really enjoy it and felt it wasn't really for them, I've only done research once and I did it with you actually and Dr. Saha. So what would you say for someone who didn't really enjoy research their first time around, whether it be the team or the type of research they're doing? Would you recommend them to try again in a different field and see how it is, or what would you recommend for me to do?
I would recommend another try at research.
Mm-hmm.
What we had over the summer is not nearly as what you would experience a whole semester of undergrad research. And also the topic you didn't get to choose, right? The topic, I mean, you had some choices, but there were limited choices.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't consider that a whole undergraduate experience like you would have in a semester long, alongside one faculty member, as part of a bigger project. So I would say, you know, give it another try. And do your research, look at the different faculty and look at what they're working on, and choose one whose research you would be interested in.
So when you did research undergrad, like in your college years, would you say it was way different than when you got to work on stuff in like PhD school, like where you were actually more passionate about the specific subject? Because undergrad, it's like we have limited options.
We did. The skills, though, that you learn in there are applied to a PhD program. You already bring the
electrophoresis and all those different, like making acid broths, all that.
So I already had that under my belt when I went to, and then I gained a lot of that also as a research technician working on a project. But the scale of the project, the impact is also, it's different, right? When you're doing a PhD program, hi, he's a cutie. The impact is a lot different, right, when you're in this PhD program.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That answers my question, Dr. Villegas.
Anyone else? We have time for about one or two more. Okay, Amrani. There's Amrani.
Hi, Dr. Villegas. Thank you for your presentation. I just had a quick question. So based on throughout your whole career pathway, how do you get to manage like all those stress or anxiety or fears that you felt through your pathway?
I like to go for runs and jog. That really helps me kind of clear my head. And even when I'm really, really busy, if I just get on the treadmill and do a couple miles on there jogging, that really clears me. Because yes, stress comes with all of this, right? But you know, self-care is important, right? Taking care of yourself, taking a day just for yourself. Because yes, there will be a lot of stress. Grad school, I remember I had one meltdown in grad school. That was right before one of my oral exams. And so, you know, I said, I can't do this. This is way too difficult. But I got myself up and I studied, and I passed that oral exam. And so it's just not letting that stress weigh you down, really finding what makes you do something that you enjoy and treat yourself, right? Because you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of anyone else.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Dr. Bella, did you want to say something?
Oh, no. I just had my whole family come look at everybody.
She has a Low and Hope Society shirt.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I just put it on this morning.
Wow.
It's only 15 years old.
Only.
Great. Looks great.
Trying to get you something. Come on.
Well, anyone else?
That Larry in the background, get him to show his face.
Uh-oh.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, and so I have a question
Hello.
regarding research. Oh, sorry.
Hey, Dr. Lewis.
All right, I have a question for Dr. Villegas. Okay,
Yes,
and so regarding research and presentations, as public speaking goes, what would you recommend just in case I kind of get nervous with my work if I ever have to present something? How did you handle that sort of situation?
Yeah, you know, I talked about the probably most daunting presentation that I've had to do was that presentation in front of a bunch of PIs that are experts in breast cancer research and me as a student, right, presenting to them. So that's been the scariest one other than my defense, right? But, you know, I think the best way to approach it is to be prepared. You can't just go up there without having rehearsed, without having prepared. You'll be a lot more comfortable if you prepare. Now, you don't want to regurgitate something. You don't want to memorize something and then go up there and just read off of a script. So it's better if it just flows as a conversation, but that requires some preparation. And it's just, you know, presenting, if you're getting ready for a presentation, doing the presentation on your own in your room, rehearsing it. And so understanding what you want to say with each slide, what kind of point you want to make. So it's all about being prepared so that you're not embarrassed once you go up there. So you know your stuff, you're prepared.
Okay, thank you so much.
if I could add, you know, the SA builds in these opportunities to present, and that's the very reason for it. Now, in your classes, now that we have flipped classrooms, you're also presenting, and that's another example of how you can practice as you're gaining your degree, right? But it's about practice, quite honestly. Anyone else? Anyone else? Well, let's we're almost at time, and let's give her a round of applause. That was excellent, right? And
thank you for the invitation.
So much for taking your time. I know you have other things to do. You're still time constrained, even as a assistant dean, right? Even more so. And thanks to all of our alumni who came to see. Whoever invited you, thank you, Dr. Usman. That was great. All right. So, yes, and we'll